Jasmine may be running late. Philip is doing some medical. Family member and may join virtually.
They just don't have a.
Sounds good. Thank you.
He was there in the nurse system.
All right, if we can get rolling. Welcome everyone to our first meeting of 2024, January 2nd, Early Childhood Education Committee meeting. Thank you all for joining us online. As you pop in, if you don't mind dropping a chat, so we know you're here. If you're a member, we'll count your votes appropriately. And just want to welcome everyone, have this moment of appreciation for what I hope is some good news coming up. But since we have quorum, while I still have all of you here, if we can go ahead and approve the minutes if everyone's had a chance to review.
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. And we'll note Susan as an aye as well. Thank you. Rachel, I'm hopeful nothing has changed from last time we talked, but if we want to start with old business, an update on the Southwest Child Development, Valley Child Development Center. For those who weren't with us last go round, had a little bit of a rough fear there that we might lose one of our providers, specifically one that had a lot of slots for teachers, was very integrated into our system. I'm not going to be an easy partner to replace. I don't think that's the intention, but trying to stop the bleeding a little bit for our public servants is the goal. And had some good news over the Christmas break, in addition to all the wonderful gifts that everyone got, I'm sure. Missed mine. You want to give us an update?
Sure, I'll put the good news up front, which is that Christine Avery Learning Center is working on a change of ownership with Southwestern Child Development to take over the services at the Swannanoa-based community high school, currently known as Valley Child Development Center. Things have been happening so quickly that I don't know that we've even had a conversation about the name, whether it will remain Valley Child Development Center. We can figure out those details when it's time. So over the last few weeks, thank you very much to our partners at Buncombe County Schools. We've got a couple of folks in the room with us today. Buncombe Partnership for Children, and many different providers. We put out a call for interest since our last meeting and asked for any providers that might have the desire or interest capacity to potentially take on services at the site, with priority for those that would be able to do it without interruption and be able to maintain the current structure, meaning an infant classroom that's all the way up through pre-K, as well as maintain partnerships that exist with the schools, et cetera. And we had 8 submissions, which was really exciting. Did not know what to expect when we put it out there. And it was really heartening to see that there was that level of desire to rally around keeping this intact. So those 45 slots will, as of February 1st, be operated by the Christine W. Avery Learning Center on the same license, the 4-star rated license through the Division of Child Development and Early Education that Southwestern has been carrying. And big thanks to the folks from the state who have been really accessible and supportive throughout the process and are willing to prioritize and expedite and support and whatever's needed to make that happen. So now we call in our attorneys and other folks that can help us with the details of getting it all in place. But one other thing I wanted to mention is the financial request. We have not yet received a financial request. So at the last meeting of this committee, there was an acknowledgement that there might be a need for financial support for the transition, covering one-time expenses for the switch and or subsidizing some of the operations during a time if there's loss of enrollment or other transitional expenses. We shared with CC Weston and her team the potential to make that request if there's a need. We haven't gotten to the place where there's been a specific request with any dollars talked about. So we would see that happening, that conversation happening in the coming few weeks. And so we would still, based on the vote of this committee last month, look to that subcommittee structure, which includes Leslie, Mark, Martin, and Kit, who have been empowered to utilize the fund balance at the discretion of this committee. I don't have dollars in front of me, dollar amounts, but we have a certain amount available that was unallocated, that's available for use without having to go to Board of Commissioners and request additional funding.
So Rachel, they haven't requested any financial assistance yet, or you don't expect that they will?
They have not requested any at this time.
Okay, so
If I were to, I hesitate to speak on behalf of any other person or
Yeah.
organization, but I would anticipate that that's likely, that they will make a request.
what about staff loss or not, or attention?
Southwestern put a communication out in December.
Yeah.
The days are running together, maybe mid-December, to the families, the enrolled families, to let them know about the situation that we were seeking a new provider. And they were communicating with the families again today at the return from the winter break, to let them know a new provider's in place, and talking with them about the opportunity to stay enrolled and switch over under the new provider. As far as staff, same messaging. I certainly would expect that families in that situation of uncertainty might be looking at options, and so we don't know if 100% will stay. They were carrying a wait list, or are carrying a wait list, so enrollment shouldn't be an issue.
What's gonna happen to Southwestern?
Southwestern Child Development has other services they provide. They are the child care resource and referral. I'm looking to the back of the room for nods. They provide other services, and they also subsidy the administration of when families apply for child care subsidy. I believe goes through Southwestern. So they have early care and education related services, just not operating child care at this time. I think it was 8 through the region that they've closed or are closing.
Wow,
In
that's what I thought.
2024.
And I think I took a look in the back, but I don't see anyone from our agency here to answer. Any other questions apart from the specific lack of number, which we acknowledge will be forthcoming, but any questions for now? I'll personally say I'm very thankful that we had so many folks step up. We were not looking at 8 as the number of potential partners that would even solicit an opportunity to work with us on that. So grateful for all of those applicants, and grateful to Cece and her team for stepping up in a very busy time of year to be willing to help us take on this challenge. Certainly want to be accessible to Southwestern through the transition, and also to Cece and her team. But I think this is the best possible outcome we could have hoped for, and we got it. So great way to start the new year.
Great job on the part of the staff to jump on it and hang with it.
Say special shout out for Rachel. You were working a lot past the amount of time that I expect anyone on our staff to work around holidays.
It was a team effort for sure, and we, I neglected to praise the Christine Avery Learning Center for what really stood out about them. There were many providers that could handle the basics, and Christine Avery stood out as an existing provider with relationships already established here in Buncombe County and with the county itself and with the schools. Their methods and approach to the instruction and one difference maker with that organization is their investment and support of their staff. Their turnover rates are very impressive. Our own Early Childhood Fund has supported some of their work, so you're likely familiar with the development opportunities they've made available for their staff to further their education, et cetera. It's certainly one of those indicators that we look to, that speaks volumes when staff choose to go and work there and stay working there. So, looking forward to the coming weeks and hopefully a seamless switchover.
Rachel? Or Chair, may I say something quickly?
We have you're not muted, but let's see if we can turn up the audio.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you can hear me.
We're working on our tech in this room.
Okay. I can put it in the chat if that's easier.
Oops.
Well, that's one way of taking care of questions.
Thank you all so much for your patience.
Any questions from folks in the room? Mike, is there anything we need to be aware of as we're navigating this transition, or just stay in touch as we go forward?
Not that I know of. They're running it up the flagpole over through the county schools administration. It probably will likely take some kind of board action to enter into a lease, but they're comfortable legally with proceeding and manage directly between the schools and
We have folks from our school here. You're welcome to speak. I didn't want to put you
Oh,
on the
no,
spot.
that's perfect. Hi, I'm Jennifer.
Oh, you're
Reed. I work
Jennifer.
with London High
Good to
School.
see you.
Good to see you. So I just have one last conversation with our CFO around liability, and I think we'll be in good shape for an agreement to be signed.
Thank you. And Susan, I think we have you back now, hopefully.
No, she's on
But she's
mute.
in
I put my comment in the chat. I don't know if anyone can read it. I was just gonna, I didn't know if we had talked about it before, but I wanted to point out that the Christine Avery Center was recently honored with an award from the governor's office. I didn't think everyone knew that.
Misty also commented that UNCC mentors their teachers, and it's a great program.
Say that again. I couldn't-
Misty commented in the
yeah.
chat that UNCC mentors their teachers,
Oh.
and
Oh,
it's a
okay.
great program.
And they are a provider of NC Pre-K, which is the state's pre-K program that we are going to be talking more about during our meeting today. So that would be an interesting opportunity if we could expand and have NC Pre-K out in that part of, in that region of our county.
Good.
Well, thank you, Rachel. And thank everyone who,
One question.
yes.
I know that in the past, we had set them up and they got a lot of training to work with children with disabilities and autism. Is that still ongoing with Christine Avery Center and other centers?
I appreciate that question, and probably I should gather their answer and bring it back. I'm not sure the current status.
That's a great question. And I think just to make sure we put a bow on it nicely, you want to put this on our next agenda meeting as well, get a check-in, see if there's any action that we need to take afterwards. Doesn't have to be long, but we can put under old business and address anything we might have missed.
Will do.
Thank you.
It would be nice too to see if all the centers have access to programs to help them with children with disabilities, because we're seeing an uprise in the schools. And it's just not, it's not right for children to have to go one hour or present a behavior and have to be sent home. It's stifling parents and the child, so something needs to be done in those regards, I think.
I think I noticed another committee member, Misty, nodding your head during that conversation. And so I may use, Misty, I may turn to you as a resource as we gather more information on that topic.
Excellent. And just for our minutes, can we put in that Missy's gonna fix it all for us? It's not a no, so I'll take it.
Yay.
Has Southwestern Child Development provided financials specific to this center to help the new provider take over?
They have. They've been very forthcoming and available. They provided during that 1 week response period when we had bidders looking into it, provided a basic level of
Okay.
information to everyone. And then once a provider was selected, it sounds like they've provided more than more than we could have even known to ask for.
Okay, that's great, especially if there might be a subsequent financial request. That's good that we have that information available if we'll need it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions or concerns on this topic? All right, we'll have that up on our agenda next go round, and I will move us into new business with the Buncombe Partnership for Children State of Childcare and update on building capacity.
And may I jump in briefly before we introduce our presenter?
Of course.
This is a two-part presentation where Buncombe Partnership for Children has, since the formation of this fund, been sharing an annual update on the state of childcare in Buncombe County. So that's the big view. And we wanted during today's meeting for them to also talk and present about the status of the pilot project. Deanna and I have not crossed paths in the last few minutes, so this is information for you as well, Deanna. The background and intro that I'll do about the NC Pre-K expansion will be in between your two pieces. So you'll do the state of childcare general, countywide information. I'll talk about the universal pre-K quote unquote project, and then Pat, back to you for status. Oh, so Jenny does the first part, sorry. Jenny, then me, then Deanna, is that the order?
Yes. Okay. All right. Good morning, afternoon. I'm Jenny Vile. I'm the Director of Childcare Resources at the partnership, and those of you that have been around for a while, I get to do this at least once a year. So today is actually going to be very short. A little bit of a quick overview orientation to what's happening in our community in early childhood, with some big picture numbers, because I want to be able to really focus on what Rachel and Deanna are gonna talk about. But as part of our contract with y'all, with your generous funding for my program, we update this quarterly. So this data is refreshed every quarter, is available on our website, and I am always available to talk through any of it, or if you read something and go, that is really weird, what does that number mean? Happy to figure that out and explain it in whatever way is most helpful. So, and we're also always happy to do this type of presentation for other groups, right? Why is it so hard in childcare, right? Business groups, we've talked to some faith-based organizations in the past, that kind of thing. So just a tiny little orientation and commercial. But for now, I've got a handful of slides and I'll pass it on. Who is clicking? Sarah, thank you. So, oh, sorry, you're good. So really what I want to talk about is people, right? I know you all are familiar that we've heard pretty much everybody who comes in say that without teachers, nothing else is happening. Right. And so these numbers are from September. Fortunately, we've had some shifts in the way that data with the Division of Child Development is collected at a county level. And so our most recent numbers are from September. We will have December ones coming soon. And then we have been told that sometime in the next couple of months, we will have new updated county level average salary numbers and those kinds of things that have not been properly updated since before the pandemic. So we'll definitely let you know when we get that. But for now, in September, we've got 800 teachers working in the community, a little over 100 administrators, and then about 75 other support staff, which can be, sometimes those are assistant directors, sometimes those are cooks, sometimes those are floaters who come in and do breaks. What we know is that these numbers from right before the pandemic are about, they fluctuate between 10 to 15% lower than the early childhood workforce in Buncombe County in winter 2019, which if you'll go to the next slide, the other way, sorry, makes this percent change of enrolled children in licensed childcare make a lot of sense, right? If we have around 100 fewer teachers working, We got almost 17% fewer children 0 to 12 enrolled in licensed care. Right? We talked a couple of months ago, we heard from several programs here talking about how even though they haven't closed, right? We lost one licensed program over the course of the pandemic, but in terms of slots, right? We're seeing this contraction of programs, right? Programs closing earlier, programs keeping fewer slots open in an existing classroom because they don't have enough staff to cover maybe open 7:30 and in the after, and staying open till 6, right? So they'll maybe be open from 8 to 5 instead, right? Which we can imagine the impact on working parents, right? If you live downtown and your childcare is down Hendersonville Road, you're leaving your office at 4:30 in order to get there before 5, right? And how that starts to impact a person's work week. Also, hearing from many providers that are keeping classrooms at the pandemic era sizes, right? Handful of slots in every classroom, smaller, it's less overwhelming for teachers. And we know that ultimately, right, it is better for children, right, to be in a smaller setting and also in a community that has a great need for childcare, especially for infants and toddlers. Is a large number of slots. I mean, 17% of slots, almost 17% of slots is a lot. Let's see. We'll keep going to the next slide. And then this is resharing something Rachel had shared, I think in November or December, and I apologize, October, sometime recently, looking at what these numbers look like specifically for grantees. Right, so how is the same theme of just a contraction of services in the community, right, across all service types, right, from private, infant childcare to Head Start, NC Pre-K. So these are licensed slots, kind of enrollment, wait list, and just a reminder that wait list is something we hear a lot about, and it's a tricky number because you realize you're gonna have a baby, you need to have childcare. And the first thing somebody says is get on all the lists, right? So just a reminder that a wait list is duplicated across, especially with younger children. Families are gonna sit on 10 wait lists. And so just keep that in mind. All right, if you go to the next slide, this just, I just wanted to remind you of this piece and this, 76%, but there's wait lists, right? So thinking about families, this is looking at some of the things where maybe in Head Start, right, the need for wraparound care, right? So maybe they've got the Head Start day, but what does transportation look like at the end of the day, right? Just sometimes these numbers don't show us all of what's happening for a family, right? Because if we're looking at, I've talked to multiple families that if the program is closing at 5, right, then they're not gonna take that slot because they cannot get there before 5:30. So what does that look like? And this is unfortunately one of those gaps in data that we don't necessarily know what is happening, but we can kind of extrapolate from things that we have seen and are looking at across the community. Yeah. So there's a lot more. This is maybe a sixth of what is in that state of childcare presentation quarterly. So definitely take a look at it and let me know if there's anything I can expand upon, but I want to make sure that I'm leaving enough time for Rachel and Deanna. But first, painting the idea that we're looking at expansion, right? Expansion is what we want, right? We want to be able to provide expanded childcare options for families, right? And no, we're going to talk specifically about NC Pre-K and about pre-K options. In order to do that, right, we're looking at stabilization, right? And what is stabilization? And establishing, kind of stopping the contracting of slots, which is happening.
Thanks for this. Do we have any sense of how the trends we're seeing locally compare to what's happening either at a statewide level or in kind of peer communities?
They're pretty similar, statewide and nationally. Early childhood is seeing, especially as the end of federal funds are happening, programs are for the last year or so have been looking ahead and going, all right, that money is going away, so we don't want to expand now and then have to pull back. So it's pretty similar. We have much fewer, we're considered a desert for infant slots. And again, in similar communities with similar cost of living, making it more expensive for early childhood providers who make less than they should to live comfortably, seeing pretty similar trends.
I think one question we've asked at the commission level is as we're sort of seeing these trends, obviously, going in the opposite direction of what we are all aspiring to, is wondering if the local investments that are happening at the county level are mitigating the amount of those negative trends in any way, or simply not enough to have that impact. So I don't know if it's possible to kind of do any deeper drill down in terms of comparative data, just to understand. There's about half a dozen counties in the state that do local investments in this. And to understand whether those local investments are in any way reducing the negative impacts that are sort of being universally felt, or not. Because I think that's the kind of, we're always sort of looking at sort of how to understand the real-time data, and that would be whether staff or whether you all are able to dig in at some point. It would be helpful to have an understanding of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm sure that can be done, absolutely. I think it is really interesting to look at, enrollment for NC pre-K slots, right? And I know Deanna's going to share some data that shows what the investment in pre-K expansion has. Definitely those trends in terms of teacher retention and enrollment do look better than the general numbers. So yeah. And
What did Misty say? What was her?
She said 19% increase from previous year, but still 5% lower than prior to pandemic. 27% cut in spending with inflation.
Is that state level data? Or is that Bunko?
Is she comparing that to
State.
76%? Misty, can you hear us?
it sounded like she was comparing it to pre.
Oh, to the previous page.
Jenny, on the providers that have more slots but are only running at the 76 capacity, what your qualitative data was reflecting that it's because it's better for smaller class sizes and better for the teachers, but is there anything that is encouraging those operators to be willing to go up on offering? It's almost kind of like there's a maximum slot, but then there's an optimal slot.
Right.
It's staffing. It's the decision making for them.
Staffing.
Yeah, it's staffing because it's programs. Whereas maybe pre-pandemic they would have had a floater teacher or substitutes that were dedicated to the program, so that if they had a teacher out, they could, that they had somebody on staff who could go in there. But we're seeing directors in classrooms, in ratio daily. I'm sorry, I'm gonna use Betsy as an example but we had 2 weeks in a row where we tried to have a meeting every single day. And she's got 4 classrooms and spent 9 of those 10 school days in ratio in the classroom. She had a teacher out with no options, right, for subs. And that is absolutely consistent, right? And so programs where they see that, if they had a floater, they would add some more kids, but they're trying to keep it so that maybe in the afternoon, and I'm kind of making this up, but out of real examples, right? Maybe in the afternoon, if they get down to a certain number of children, they'd only need one child, they'd only need one teacher to cover that classroom. So it's staffing constraints and just the continued challenge of hiring, especially at those lower paid floating kind of extra, not that a teacher is ever extra, but the kind of extra teacher that would come in and cover absences and that kind of thing.
Jenny, I'm sorry, this is Misty, and I apologize. I've got school's not in yet, so I've got teens and cats and people rolling around my house right now. I agree with what you're seeing. What we're seeing are a lot of schools are switching to having a single teacher with an increased number of children, which is not, beneficial to obviously quality educational outcomes that we would like to see. But The state data I gave is from a report we got in May, so we are seeing very similar numbers across the state that we're still low, but without teachers, and we're all low as far as mentors and evaluators from the NC pre-K perspective. All of our caseloads are about half the size that they were prior because we're so low on teachers in classrooms.
And we've seen several private programs locally in the last 6 months go to that model, reduce numbers and put one teacher in a classroom.
What is the model, reduced number of?
So instead of, like, for example, in a preschool classroom of 18, instead of having 2 teachers,
Have one for
reduce it to 9, and then if they're not at certain licensing levels, they can have, 10 2-year-olds with, a higher number than feels sustainable with one teacher. Which then when we start talking about behavior, right, and special
Right.
needs, and you've got, it's no wonder that we're seeing expulsions and,
I think to Carol's point about that gap between what they might be licensed for in the past and what the optimum number was that they wanted to serve for whatever reasons. I think I heard you saying that's not a factor anymore. If I understood what you were saying.
I think what we're seeing in several programs, let's see, Amy from Regent Park spoke about this in September, right? She was talking about how she had lower numbers and the teachers were, because of staffing, right? She had to go to lower numbers in each classroom because of staffing. And then she recognized that the teachers had less stress because it was lower numbers. And so she said, if I can afford to keep it this way, this is what I want to do. And then she kind of, on the other hand, was like, well, but also, even if I wanted to go hire with more teachers, I can't hire anyone. So it's kind of this yes and, right? They're seeing that there are some positives to lower numbers, and can they keep somebody sustainably in those positions? So I think different programs have different reasoning, for the ways
Yes,
that
I'm
they've
thinking
shifted.
they already were going to lower numbers to get to their optimum, but maybe now their optimum, given everything that's happened in the world, is lower than it used to be.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Is maybe another way to think about it.
And it's also very individual based on, the program and what is their space like. And,
Right, a lot of it's space.
is the director's office close enough that she can, hear a teacher yell out the door for support, and that might change what they're willing to run. Some of it is absolutely subjective.
So if we say providers are enrolled at only 76%, that's of course the licensed slots and the enrollment there.
So this slide, just a reminder, this slide is just from your grantees. And I believe this is quarter
And
one
we need to
data.
put that on the headline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a little confusing.
This is a snapshot, right?
This is like beginning of year survey.
Okay, beginning of your survey from, and this is just your grantees. If you go back 2 slides, please. This number here is, and again, this is 0 to 12, but this is the April 23 enrollment number, and we can update this number. This will be updated in the next month or so to a more recent number, but we're not seeing it fluctuate much from over the last.
So what on this slide here, what percentage of the children enrolled are after school age, grade level?
I do not know off the top of my head, but I can find out. It's not a huge number. That is another thing that we have seen is that got a lot of school age providers that because of staffing have stayed unlicensed because they can run slightly larger numbers. But I can find out. Probably with the next data, so it's a more recent number. I can get that to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Quick snapshot. To move on, for those following along online, we're going to be on slide 6. Actually, no, we're switching slideshows. Is that right?
Yes, this
Pivot,
is
switch slideshows.
a late edition. I had planned to do this introduction verbally, And as I was preparing my talking points for this meeting, I realized it might be easier to have slides. So the next slide states the vision, and I like starting here because it reminds us that we're coming at this from Buncombe County government's strategic plan and commitment within education to kindergarten readiness. Certainly early care and education helps us accomplish health and lots of other wellness outcomes for kids and families, but we're looking at this through the kindergarten readiness lens. On the next slide, we've got the plan. And it's my job today to paint a little background on how we got here to the idea or plan to establish and pilot this local model to supplement and expand the existing NC Pre-K program. The next slide has a timeline which starts in January 2021, and I'm going to go through this in more detail in the subsequent slides, so no need to take it all in here. But I will point out that if you were to go back past the beginning of this timeline, it was October 2018 when our Board of Commissioners voted to establish the Early Childhood Education Fund in general, Education Development Fund. And so we had our first grant process that following spring of 2019, and grants for the fiscal year 2020 was the first year that the grant program was active. So it wasn't much longer, much later, when the commissioners met and had a conversation about researching universal pre-K. Next slide. The charge from that January 2021 conversation from our Board of Commissioners was to explore what it looked like to work toward universal pre-K within Buncombe County. And so we formed a subgroup that did a lot of intensive work that spring, coming up with definitions and looking at data and studying models and gathering input and interviewing people and coming up with this recommended direction. Of the people at the table right now, I think Misty and Leslie were both on that subgroup. That's from memory. So if you were also on that sub-team and I didn't name you, please feel free to chime in. Next slide. Show some key elements that this work group came up with to help essentially shape the recommendations. They wanted to make sure that what we come up with is diverse and inclusive and equitable through multiple lenses of the definition of equitable or populations, I guess. High quality, accessible, reflective of what families in the community are saying they want and need, focused on data, appropriately financed, and I listed this to particularly call out the last bullet, which is responsive to changes within the early childhood system. Next slide talks about NC Pre-K, and this was the reason that we landed here. Buncombe County, Jasmine was just mentioning a few minutes ago, is one of a few counties, that there are a handful of counties in the state that are involved as investors in early care and education. It's not something counties must do. So this is a system that is highly invested in by federal and state entities, agencies, and funding sources. And whatever we designed here locally, we wanted to be responsive to that broader system. And NC Pre-K is the state's answer to pre-kindergarten. And so we spent some time studying and looking at the NC Pre-K program, which the most recent data that we had included in this presentation was from 2022, which at that time was 435 slots by 8 providers across 27 locations. Next slide. If we were to try to expand NC Pre-K in Buncombe, One of the factors or contextual items the committee was looking at was My Future NC. They had established a goal statewide to try to expand the NC pre-K program to 75% of eligible children. As of 2022, 35% of the income eligible children. There's more than just income as a way to become eligible, but just looking at income alone, we're at 35 compared to 53% statewide, with a goal to get to 75%. And there's some information in there that we looked at about what more it would take to get there. Next slide goes into some of the things that got in the way of trying to expand. So if the state had showed up with enough money for each one of those slots and said, okay, here you go, Buncombe, ready to spend it, we would have had a hard time doing so. The per child reimbursement rate is only covering like 60% of what providers are truly spending delivering the care for NC Pre-K in NC Pre-K classrooms. The program requirements are very stringent, including teacher licensure. We talk about BK licensure needed. There's other sort of equivalencies and pathways to get there, but you need a highly educated and qualified lead teacher in each NC Pre-K classroom. Teachers that go through that licensure process and work in NC Pre-K were paid much less than their peers, licensed teachers in the K-12 system. There weren't ramp-up supports. So if a provider wanted to join NC Pre-K, they needed to meet everything on day one, rather than given some leeway or runway to get there. There wasn't funding adequately to cover the administrative development, training, operational expenses. It was fractured and complicated on the family side to navigate. It was tethered to the school day, school year, which doesn't make it ideal for every family that's needing it, like say to work. It's not a program that comes with transportation. So those were barriers that the group looked at, leading to the next slide, which talks about the model. So here we are now by May of that year, 2021, and the ad hoc work group comes back with some recommendations that are then voted on and endorsed by this full committee to establish a local model to supplement and expand the NC Pre-K program to increase kindergarten readiness, including more robust support to existing providers, access for new providers to join, career development, to develop partnerships to address the workforce desert, infrastructure to address data gaps. Next slide. So we did a contract with Buncombe Partnership for Children, who engaged with this local planning, Asheville Buncombe Preschool Planning Collaborative, an interagency and community, including committee that assisted, and they also worked with a third party that gets named on the next slide to shape up what would that look like to have a model that does these things, supplements and expands, has that more robust support, more access, the career development infrastructure. You can tell I made it today. I think that was a duplicate list from the other slide. Okay, intended result. We came up with some things that we wanted to see as a result of a fully built out program. If we had the money to fund it and it worked, we would want to see that it was responsive to changes at the state level, of which there have been plenty, and changes even at the local level, of which there have been plenty. Positions us well to expand when we're able to get that more NC Pre-K funding here, serve more kids, have better access for children and families, strengthen workforce, enhance data, higher levels of kindergarten readiness, that's our ultimate goal, and narrowing, reducing, eliminating that gap. When we talked about data, we're going to again, I think next month, look at our annual data review of kindergarten readiness, and we see those gaps by race. the day that children enter kindergarten. This is one of the strategies to try to reduce it. So Buncombe Partnership for Children worked with those partners, including Child Care Services Association, came out with a report, which was published in December 2021 and endorsed by this committee in February of 2022, which Deanna is going to talk about more, but just briefly on the next slide, I'll show that it has 6 core strategies, which go the top row addresses barriers for providing, and the bottom row in the blue addresses barriers to accessing NC Pre-K. And I won't go into all the details of what these strategies entail because we're gonna pass to Deanna to go into more of that. I will show on the next slide the cost for each strategy at that time added up to a total of $3.2 million for a 2-year pilot, which you'll see on the next slide was funded by the Board of Commissioners using one-time funds. So they tapped into the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, COVID recovery funding to do so. The next slide lists a few key details about that project, which importantly here have the dates. It started July 1, 2022. It goes through September 30, 2024. Their year 1 report is published. It's in our packet today, but it's also, there's a web shortcut, buncombecounty.org/pre-K report. The current funding expires on that date listed there, September 30th, which is in our county's FY25. So Buncombe Partnership did the work to estimate how much would be needed to carry through the rest of FY25 if this committee wants that to continue. There's a price tag there of about just north of $1 million. And the committee voted to invite Buncombe Partnership to submit that proposal through the grant process, which would come to us by February as an application. And thus what that would accomplish is folding the consideration of this investment into our annual grants process once the pilot has ended. I believe that's my last slide. Questions about how we got here before Deanna presents to us about how it's been going?
Well done and preparing it in a
Yes.
day, that's amazing.
We had it all in other slides. Just put it all together.
Yeah, that's
So
tricky.
it's a lot. We've covered a lot of territory, and it's exciting to be where we are.
And can you send us that?
Yes.
That'd be great.
Well, if there are no questions, we will go back to our original slides here for the final part of our presentation. Thank you for presenting, Deanna.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm already lamenting because I want at least a half an hour for us to just kind of have questions and have the opportunity. This is, I will say up front, you all know this very well, but when we start talking about the funding of these programs, it gets really complicated really quickly. You all know that, and you know, we start looking at data and all of that stuff, it gets really complicated. So I apologize up front for that complication. I'm gonna try really hard today. I want you to leave here really understanding in a way that we haven't talked about before exactly where the money for this ARPA funded project has gone and exactly who it's impacted. So that's what I'm gonna do today, walk through each of those 6 strategies and look at where did the funding for this strategy go? And what pieces of the system have we touched or impacted? We don't have enough time because I want you to ask a lot of questions. So please feel free to stop me and ask clarifying questions, like if something I say just doesn't make sense as we go along, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end for more general discussion if that works.
All right. Actually, can you go back for just a second? I just wanna, Rachel did all of this framing, just back to this, Rachel did all this framing about how this, where we came from to do this project. I wanna point out that the name of this project, and this was the name on the original report, it was the name of our proposal for our grant to the county commissioners for COVID recovery funding, was building capacity in Buncombe County to expand NC pre-K. Because we were at the beginning of COVID when we wrote this, or deep in the worst of COVID really, when we prepared this report, we knew we couldn't expand on day one, right? And actually in December 2021, when we turned this report in, there was not a provider in Buncombe County who would have taken one more NC pre-K slot. We had several people telling us they were about to give up their NC pre-K program, private providers, because they were losing money. So this building capacity to expand is really important, and that's what we have done over the past year and a half. So I'm not going to talk about just as Rachel said, 3 strategies focused on the barriers that providers had in providing NC pre-K around funding and workforce and things like that. And then we had 3 strategies focused on the barriers that families experienced in trying to access NC pre-K. So this was an ambitious project, to say the least. You can keep going. So here's the first strategy. This is what I'm going to kind of walk through with each of these strategies. So please stop me and make sure that you have the details if you need them. This first strategy was a fully funded NC pre-K, right? Because the state published a report back in 2018, I think, that said NC pre-K is funded basically at 60% of the cost, right? In many counties, NC pre-K is primarily offered through their public schools. So the public school system is able to cover some of that cost with Title I and that kind of thing. In Buncombe County, that's not how it is. Asheville City has some NC pre-K slots. They do not really have, they don't have a significant Title I or other funding that they put into those slots. Head Start offers a lot of our NC pre-K slots, and then we have private providers. So 60% of what is actually required to do this program is paid for by the county. So to date, and this was I think at the end of November, the money from Buncombe County locally that went into NC pre-K providers directly in the form of additional per slot supplements is a little over $900,000. And that was going into 432 slots. The other funding piece of this, in addition to a per slot kind of supplement, to actually pay for the cost of providing the program, we also gave extra money to private providers who had NC pre-K teachers with more years of experience on their license, because private providers do not have that Title I money or the Head Start money or other money to pay those qualified teachers what they deserve. And from an equity perspective, we did not want the Christine Averys and the Verners and our private childcare providers to be hiring first-year teachers because that's all they could afford, when Head Start and Asheville City Schools could afford more experienced teachers. So that's the money that has gone directly into private providers and mostly has gone right back out as teacher salaries to date. And like I said, what this does is it stabilizes 43 classrooms, 432 slots, and these are children who in many cases wouldn't be able to afford childcare in another setting, or have developmental needs or language proficiency needs. That means without this high quality care, they would be starting kindergarten significantly at a challenge, right? The opportunities that they have not had that everybody else in their classroom has had. The thing that I think is the most significant impact of this program and this money is that we now have 4 new NC pre-K sites. In December 21, I told you no one, not one provider would take an extra NC pre-K slot. 4 new sites since we started this project applied to be NC pre-K, have open slots. That's more opportunity. These are all private sites scattered around the county. More opportunities for our kids across the county to access NC pre-K. 43, so other impacts, 43 lead teachers who are our most experienced, most educated early education teachers in our county are now paid at parity with K-12 teachers. Some of these teachers before this raise were making $12,000 to $15,000 less than they would have been making in public schools. And every year that got harder and harder to justify staying in early childhood. NC pre-K, one of the things I really want to make sure that you take away today is that Jenny told you about a story of contraction at the local, state, and federal level when it comes to early childhood. NC pre-K is not a story of a contraction right now. We have not expanded in it yet, but we are not a story of contraction. Average lead teacher retention right now is 90%, which is significantly better than a lot of our programs. 2 summers ago, for example, there were, before the teachers knew that this project was coming and that salary increase was coming, there were 7 NC pre-K teachers who left 2 years ago, just over the summer. This past summer, there were 2 teachers who left. And that's the difference between the summer before they got this raise and this raise and the supports that come along with it. And the summer that they have experienced the support. So, and I also just want to point out a huge impact of this first strategy is teachers feeling like they are recognized as professionals. They are paid at the same rate that the people with the exact same certification in a different building in the public schools are paid, finally. And as a system, new teachers in the early childhood field can look at the salary of an NC pre-K teacher and say, wow, that's actually worth me going to school and sticking with this and getting my degree. And that's a huge gift to the field. So I'm spending a lot of time, I won't spend this much time obviously on the rest of the slides, but this is honestly the piece of the work that is the bulk of the cost. It's a huge percentage of what the ask from you will be. Some of the workforce things we're working on sliding into Dogwood grants and other things. We are actively working on other funding for the pieces that we can, but this is hugely impactful, and this money makes NC pre-K not a story of contraction like everything else in the early childhood field. And I will say the numbers that Jenny showed were from September, maybe early September. NC pre-K is now 97% enrolled in Buncombe County. That's 91% at the state level. It is different. And it is different because we are keeping our teachers. And because programs are looking at NC pre-K not as a drain on their system, but as a stabilizing force financially, and also the experience, with having an experienced veteran educated teacher in the building. Any questions about this one strategy before we go a little bit quicker through the rest of it?
Yeah, you may address this later, so feel free to handle it then. But with that 97% enrollment,
yes,
do we know how that correlates to there were 35% of eligible children enrolled. The goal is to get to 75%. Do we know how that increase correlates to that percentage?
I don't think so that number was based on the slots, so that hasn't changed, right?
So still 30, so we should still say.
Unless the county has fewer children now, fewer 4-year-olds, it's still basically the same percentage.
Okay.
Because we have not gotten more NC pre-K slots. Because those NC pre-K slots, this is where it starts getting muddy and complicated. NC pre-K slots are allocated by the state, and the state has not said, hey, anybody want more slots in the last several years. Sorry, there's a Susan Mills.
Looks like it's 10 less. I had 442.
Yeah,
slots in our
so
county at that time, and now we're at 432. So overall slots in Buncombe that were NC pre-K have reduced by 10 since 2022.
Yeah, and the number that Jasmine is referring to is actually 435, because that's the number of seats that we were in contract with the state 2 years ago. The reason why, and again, this is why it starts getting really muddy. I am happy to talk to anyone in great detail about all of this for sure. The reason why we're at 432 now and not 435 or that 440 is because in getting to 97% enrollment, part of what we've had to do is move some of the slots that were in Head Start to other private programs, because Head Start has had the most struggles with their staffing. They have some classrooms still closed. They had several classrooms closed last year. But the problem with moving a slot from Head Start and to a private center is that slot, a private center slot, is more expensive. So it takes 2 slots away from Head Start to fund 1 slot in a private center. But we had to do it because 2 empty slots in Head Start is a lot worse than 1 full slot in a private center, right? So we were making these shifts and some funding to make sure that children in our community are served. On paper, that looks like a couple fewer slots.
Deanna, does the state's method for assigning us slots reward high levels of enrollment? So if we're at 97, and next time they give out slots, is that one of the factors they'll look at compared to everyone else's 91? Like, we can use the money if they send it to us?
I think sometimes it works the other way. They will say, oh, you're only at 70% enrolled, we're taking slots away. I don't know that they generally are, here you go, good job. I don't know.
Sorry, I think I started talking at the same time, maybe as someone, maybe Jasmine or Sarah.
Dr. Mims had a question in the chat, which is, can you speak to the difference in how pre-K is structured and funded in Buncombe versus the way you mentioned other counties funding it through the public schools?
Yeah, we did some work on this in the original report. I want to say, I'm going to get the number wrong. It's in the original support. I want to say something like 76%, might have even been higher, of counties in North Carolina had public schools as their main NC pre-K provider. The public schools in Buncombe County just have not been in the population-wide pre-K business. Asheville City Schools has had a great preschool program for a long time, but it's not, it's a program that survives on NC pre-K funding and Head Start funding and private tuition funding, and they make up the difference when they have to, because they do run in red with that funding. But there's not a Title I line item that keeps Asheville City Schools preschool expanding. In Buncombe County, we have the CTE classrooms, and that's really it. So it's just a different model, and I was not around 30 years ago when those decisions were made. There are Head Start classrooms in a lot of Buncombe County schools co-located, but that is a matter of location. There's some, from the Head Start perspective, I think they benefit from, not having to pay as much rent and things like that. But we do not fund pre-K at a broad population-wide free pre-K for the kids who need it in our public schools.
While you're transitioning between slides, for anyone who wants to give public comment, we have a sign-up sheet in the back. I'm going to grab that in about 5 minutes just to make sure we leave enough time for anyone who may want to comment. Thank you.
You can go to the next slide, please. I'm not going to go through these. These are some really powerful quotations from directors and teachers. Because of time, you can read those. You have them in your packet. Let's go on to the next one. Higher education supports. This is the second strategy. It's also one of the ones focused on provider barriers. And we designed this to address the fact that we didn't have a pool of teachers with the AA degrees and the BK degrees to be in that NC pre-K classroom. So we have, this funding covers one higher education coach. It covers about $35,000 a year goes to tuition and or stipends for working ECE teachers to also take ECE classes. Or as I say ECE classes, they can be in an AA or a BK program and take whatever classes they need to take. And then we do some barrier reduction kinds of things. We've bought and lent out computers, laptops, so that they can do their homework. We hold some study sessions, literally just so that they can have 2 hours of uninterrupted time with childcare and food to do homework. And they work all day. The ones who have kids really value coming to those study sessions and having a babysitter and having a little help and working with each other and getting some of that work done. The coach really helps them leverage things like teach and wages. Also, some of the local college programs that Dogwood has been funding, like the new the LEAF program at Western Carolina that can help them get a BK degree. Some of the newer programming at AB Tech that helps them move through a little bit more quickly to get certificates. The coach is really working with every participant to make sure they have as much financial support through all these different avenues, that they're enrolled in the things that are going to meet their needs. So far, we've had 49 teachers be part of this. A lot of them have continued for the year and a half that we've done it. The average years of experience of those 49 teachers is 10.7 years that they've been in the ECE field. So this is different from the stuff that's happening to get new teachers into the field. This is keeping the teachers who are saying, I want to be here and I want to invest in my own education and my own professionalism. And I wanted to put this down here because it's really important. We support 22 programs. Those 49 teachers were employed in 22 different programs across the county. That's really important because part of this was born out of directors saying, my teachers just need help with all of this registration, all the registration process, and they don't know how to do all the Moodle stuff, all the online platforms, and they don't know, they I have to sit down and help them do the Teach application, and it was taking so much time away from directors who were feeling really overwhelmed and just couldn't do that little bit of hand-holding and support to get teachers who were really interested in education back into the classroom. And that's what that educator is, or that higher education coach, whatever we call her, is been doing. And people love it. And it's really making a difference. The people in this program average about 6 credit hours per semester that they're completing, all with a C or better so far. We've had a couple people drop out for like personal, health emergency, things like that. But it's been a really popular program. Only 2 current NC Pre-K assistant teachers are in this program. This is mostly supporting the broader pool of teachers. This is not existing NC Pre-K teachers. This is anybody who wants to advance their education. Again, some quotations and stuff from the field, but I just want to point out 86% of the participants said, I am more likely to keep teaching. I'm definitely more likely, and then the other 14% said somewhat more likely to keep teaching early childhood education because of this program. Okay, next. Ramp up to NC Pre-K. I'm gonna go faster because I know we're almost out of time and I do want you to please stop me and ask questions. Ramp up to NC Pre-K, this was a thing, again, Rachel mentioned the barrier of directors saying NC Pre-K is a huge lift, a lot more requirements. Even a 5-star program that has a really strong program probably isn't using the required curricula and the required assessments and doing all these things that NC Pre-K requires of programs. And NC Pre-K doesn't give them any kind of can't really give them any kind of financial help or much technical assistance until they become an NC Pre-K provider. So it's just a really hard situation to put a provider in. So this was an effort to create an on-ramp for programs that wanted to explore this, that wanted to learn all those really expensive assessments and the curricula and things like that to get practice and coaching and training in that stuff before they signed on the dotted line and said, yeah, I'm going to be an NC Pre-K provider. So it's cool that all 4 of our CTE classrooms in Buncombe County are in this program. This does not mean that they have said we are definitely going to apply to be NC Pre-K. It doesn't mean that the NC Pre-K Advisory Committee will definitely accept them if they apply, but we're getting more classrooms in the county NC Pre-K ready. And that's good for kids in those classrooms, whether they end up being an NC Pre-K provider next year or the year after or not. Yeah, we can go to the next one. I know you all have questions about the single portal of entry. This is a really core part of what we're doing in Pre-K in Buncombe County, because from the family perspective, a lot of people have never heard of NC Pre-K. Head Start's been around for decades. There are a lot of people who know about Head Start and don't know about NC Pre-K. We heard from a lot of families who were really frustrated that they applied for Head Start, didn't find out until really late in the summer that they weren't eligible for Head Start and had no idea that they could have applied for this other program that they would have been eligible for. Because NC Pre-K has a much higher, it's about double the income eligibility. So the money that you are investing goes to one bilingual outreach and enrollment coordinator. She's amazing. It goes to an application portal, which is secure for families, gives us a lot more data than we've ever had on who's applying to and getting into Pre-K programs, both Head Start and NC Pre-K. And this bilingual coordinator can also help any family who gives her a call do the whole application over the phone. Nobody needs to be computer literate. And then about $10,000 a year for outreach, for printing materials, for showing up at every community event that we can get our little feet into to talk to people about Pre-K. And over 700 families have engaged in this system. Like I said, it's an opportunity for a lot more concrete data on wait lists and who we've done maps of where the applicants have actually come from, what zip codes, things like that. And it is still the long-term goal of this project to expand to all potentially 3 and 4-year-old pre-K applications, hopefully one day 0 to 5 applications. There are some state and regional systems issues that makes that a little challenging, but we are continuing to head in that direction. And if you go to the next slide, that's just again, another quotation from a family, from a parent that we captured in one of our surveys. We've had people say, could you do the same thing for charter schools? Because this is amazing. How would we ever find? We've actually, Cindy, who's that bilingual coordinator, gets calls from families that she helped last year say, could you please help us enroll in like kindergarten or help my school age kid? Because we keep calling and there's no Spanish speaker, or there's it's a need that is being met, and families are really responding well to it. So go to the next slide. I know we only have 5 minutes, I'm so sorry. Transportation and wraparound are the two accessibility issues that we hear about from families. When we originally wrote this report, we kind of envisioned just telling NC Pre-K providers, we will give you, $100 a month or whatever the number is to provide transportation or to provide more wraparound care for children, kind of a number per slot. And the workforce crisis that was not fully realized when we wrote that report, when we were still focused on health, the health impacts of COVID, more than the workforce impacts, made that impossible. Nobody had staff, especially what would be kind of part-time staff to provide after-school care or cover bus routes, things like that. So we've done some different things with this. One of the cool things is some families are getting some direct kind of supports, gas cards, bus passes. We are paying directly for some families who need that wraparound care in order to be in NC Pre-K, but don't, for whatever reason, qualify for subsidy, that kind of thing. The providers have the flexibility to kind of identify families who might benefit from this, and they've basically used it like an emergency fund. When a family loses their job and says, I'm not going to be able to, pay for gas to get my kid back and forth every day, the provider can say, we have this opportunity to give you a $100 gas card every month. Would that make it possible for you to keep your kid in the program? And in 14 cases, they've said yes, right? So we're being creative and piloting, as was our charter from you all and the commissioners, ways that we can meet families' needs creatively. So I'm going to be quiet now and invite questions, comments, things. I don't know if we have time for any of that. Maybe I should just be quiet and let you speak.
Questions, jump in.
Is the $80,000 contracted research, who's providing that?
So it's a company, they are out of Montana, but have a person locally. It's called JG Research. They have done a lot of education research at the state level in Montana and in other places. But they have a local person here who had a long, impressive resume in community-based participatory research. So we are working with some parents that we've trained to do interviews with peer parents and family members. And we've done a community-wide survey, and the JG is and we're exploring the things that you can't get from a survey in these interviews. Especially the hesitations that families might have around language or around race or around just beliefs about what pre-K is and isn't, that might come out in those peer-to-peer interviews that aren't ever going to come out in another way. So,
Deanna, are you sticking around for 5 minutes after this?
absolutely.
So if anyone has any burning questions or wants to have a more in-depth question about the slideshow, please feel free. She's donating her time. Thank you.
Thanks.
And we'll send out this, the full presentation to the committee as well as the report that Misty had dropped in the chat earlier.
Awesome. Thank you. I wasn't trying to let you go. We actually have another minute if someone has a burning question.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy, yes. Happy to answer any questions, happy to stay here after the meeting as long as anybody wants to talk more.
So, yeah, the portal system, which we helped to fund
Yes.
back a while. So what I heard you say is that it's used for NC pre-K enrollment, but not for 0 to 5 or kids who are not in NC pre-K. Is that correct?
It's,
You still don't have that capability?
So it is used for the public pre-K applications. So a family can go into the portal and they can put in an application. They can choose sites in Asheville City Schools. They can choose NC Pre-K private center sites, or they can choose Head Start sites. And it means that the parent, the family member who's doing that application doesn't have to know, oh, I make, $50,000, so I'd be eligible for this, but not this. And, maybe I could go here, but, my child has a special need. And so the need, that need is going to be met much better at this program that has a full-time behavioral specialist and rather than this one or whatever, like that. It allows parent to do one application and we work with each other behind the scenes to figure out what's going to meet this family's need.
But if they're looking for childcare for their 2-year-old, we're not able to do that.
No, and the truth is,
Objective.
it is an objective. The state, Jenny can speak more to this than I can, but currently the state has these regional call centers that do education and referrals, and it got real complicated with them saying, hey, you're stepping on our toe. I mean, not, just that's what they have been contracted to do. And they have to show numbers and they have to, promote that this is the source of information. But they don't have kind of ready, it's a long conversation, but it got messy, but we're not giving up.
Okay.
Is that fair to say, Jenny?
I mean, one
I
of the
think
things
that was the
Southwestern
vision.
still does
Yeah.
is our regional childcare referral system. And the conversation really was around not wanting to be confusing for families who are looking for childcare. And so not wanting to switch the system outside of subsidized care, right? Outside of NC Pre-K for 4-year-olds until we were ready for the whole thing to be there. Because, we want to simplify it for families. And so we don't want families to be in the position of going to both places. So we are excited to see what that will look like. And we think there are some great options for that, but that is.
Yes. And those folks were at the table for 3 years as we developed the portal. They were in discussions with us. We just, we don't want to, the different funding streams and kind of organizational levels of some of the infrastructure that's there doesn't always make it easy to streamline things for families.
Excellent. I think that's a perfect place to stop for now. Thank you so much for your time. If anyone has any questions, stick around. But otherwise, I will move us into the announcements section of our meeting. As we're closing out, February agenda is going to include Dogwood Health Trust as our guest to share a little bit about the early childhood education investments that they've made. And we'll also have our annual update on annual data update for kindergarten readiness. Also, for those who haven't seen, the deadline to submit an application for the community investment notice on our website is February 9th, 2024, and that's for our funding cycle beginning July 1. We don't have anyone who signed up for public comment. That is the first in the time I've been chair, so I'll give you back in 30 seconds. Anyone have any objection to adjourning? I will see y'all next time. We are going to be in this room again, and that meeting will be February 6th, 1 to 2:30. Y'all have a good one.
Thank you.
Everybody online.
Happy New Year.